What's up, guys? Welcome back to the review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 298. 298? Yes, 298. Just gonna jump right into it. This episode is phenomenal. Rereading it a second time, I really got a good perspective on everything, and it's amazing. And I'm just going to say it right now, this episode is a level 10 without a doubt. Episode 299 might also be a level 10 depending on how it goes. But let's go ahead, jump into this episode right now. Arlo tells Sarah that she needs to leave Wellston. Thankfully, I had my doubts, and I really thought for a second he wouldn't, but thankfully he explains the situation, telling her that the authorities are coming after her. They know she's a Volwood Spectre, and they want to imprison her. Sarah asks Arlo why he's telling her and why he would risk his career for her. Arlo tells Sarah that he was able to find out after reviewing his records that Terrence is dead. He's not sure how it happened because that's kept private. And they also probably don't know because, Spectre showed up to kill him. So the authorities probably don't know how it happened, honestly. But he doesn't want Sarah to end up like her. Arlo even mentions that the authorities are probably coming to get her at Wellston tomorrow. And Sarah thanks Arlo, and as he walks away, he even tells her before he leaves not to make him regret the decision to tell her. So that's a really interesting scene. And if they're coming for Sarah, they may also be coming for Remy, Blake, and Ison as well. We do know that Cassandra has that information that she was able to find on Vaughn now. Vaughn is also preparing for war as well. Well, not really, but Vaughn knows that a storm's coming. So Cassandra might show up, and she might take Remy, Blake, and Ison away from Wellston as well for readjustment facilities. So later on, John meets up with Sarah in her room. He asks loudly what happened, why she left, but she quiets him down so that her roommate doesn't hear them talk. She tells him that the authorities know about her involvement with Spectre, and he asks to leave. And she has to leave. John then asks her when she's gonna be back. And I fucking love this scene. The decisions that Uru made art-wise it's phenomenal. It's the shot when he asks her when she'll be back is very similar to episode 224. I brought this up in the reaction. It's almost the exact same shot, but this time John is the one, and they're even in the same position too. John is the one standing above Sarah looking down at her as she's on her knees in a helpless situation. There's a white background and everything too, and it's just her bag there that's with them. But what's really sad, and I realized about this scene, is that Sarah's in a hopeless situation, but there's not really anything that John can do to help her in this situation. Before, Sarah was able to break John out of his own barrier and talk him down and reassure him that he wasn't a monster, that she didn't hate him, and that he had changed, he had become a better person. This time, John offers to help Seraphina, but she knows that that's really dangerous for him to do. She knows that she can't accept that help, and she even tells him, she could probably never come back. And John asks her why this always happens to them when things calm down, even for just a little bit for them. He does offer to go with her so she doesn't have to go it alone, but she tells him because it would implicate him with her, and she's right. Right now, compared to everyone else, John has a fairly clean slate with the authorities. He's not a member of Spectre like Sarah. He hasn't been labeled a terrorist. A public threat, maybe, but he did complete the readjustment facility. And Keon believes he is rehabilitated to some extent, though he does want to meet with John again, which Vaughn was able to block. But also, unlike Remy, Blake, and Ison, John's not a vigilante. He doesn't have that on his record. There's nothing to tie him to vigilantism other than the fact that he's read UnOrdinary, but again, because his father read the book. People at the authorities should know that, especially if they're investigating John. That should be on his record. Just saying. So, it's really sad that it's a beautiful shot and a recreation of a scene from before when she was able to help him, but now that the tables are turned, he can't help her, unfortunately. But John does mention that he doesn't want to lose Sarah again, but she tells him that with both of their abilities expiring soon, probably within a few days, honestly, it's going to be easier for them both to get caught more than ever. But she promises that she'll stay in touch with Gon. But considering that they may be tracking her now, and, they may be able to wiretap her phone or something, I don't think she will be able to stay in touch with John. As she makes the promise, though, John grabs her and hugs her tightly, begging her not to go. And the only thing that Sarah says before they leave is, "I'm sorry." Now, some people brought up, and I know a lot of people are excited in the community, and I want to ask the question, is this Jarrah bait? And personally, I do think so. I was completely okay with John and Sarah being platonic friends only, and I'm still okay with that if Uru does want to do it. But I think Uru has been dropping hints that maybe there is something more there going on, and I'll touch on that a little bit more at the end too. But even if this isn't Jarrah bait, even if it's just two platonic friends doing this with each other, I think it's still beautiful that they're this close because they have been through a lot together. They've done a lot together. They lost their abilities together. They got them back together. We've seen that Sarah means a lot to John, and in recent episodes and recent events, we've seen that John means just as much to Sarah. So, I think it's great. But it is also nice to see. It is also something I want to bring up that I did bring up in previous discussions. It's somewhat poetic, and it's a really good kind of full circle thing that once again Arlo is the trigger for their separation. But unlike before where it was for completely selfish reasons and for Arlo to try and tear down John and regain control of Sarah, Arlo's doing this for completely unselfish reasons. Like Sarah said, he's risking his career, something he's worked for his entire life, for the sake of his friend's freedom. Before, it was about controlling Sarah. Now it's about making sure that Sarah isn't imprisoned, making sure that Sarah's free. And even before, like we saw with John, Arlo apologized to John. Everything's kind of coming full circle again. The story's kind of repeating itself, but the opposite way, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Now, with all this being said, does this also make us think that once the trio is out of the way, and Arlo, because like I said, the authorities might be coming tomorrow, they're probably going to take Remy, Blake, and Ison too, Arlo will be busy with his job at the Bureau. John will be yet again alone. And it will be his turn to finally accept his role. Now, there's a few things that have to play out here we have to consider. Vaughn is getting removed as headmaster. If Vaughn were to stay, Blake, Remy, and Ison had to leave, Vaughn would automatically tell John, "You need to be king." Now, let's hypothetical think here. What if Cameron does become headmaster of Wellston? He meets John and tells John, "You're the strongest student here. You're the king." John did also mention before, as he was reflecting on what Remy, Blake, and Ison were doing as vigilantes, he told himself he wanted to be someone that he could be proud of. And what better way to do that than have him being the last person who can make a change, who can make a difference at Wellston as the king, as the rightful king. Not the Shadow King, not the King of New Boston, not the Joker, the rightful king of Wellston. the King of Aura. I think that would be amazing to see. Now, chapter ends off with William arriving home, and he finds a letter from none other than Simon, who had to have left it before he was killed. I am starting to think maybe Simon is in William's apartment building dumpster, but who knows for certain? But most likely was left while William was meeting with Cameron. Inside, Simon writes that he managed to get to Jane at the Next Gen facility, and she wrote a letter for William to try and clear up any misunderstandings. And that's where we leave off for tomorrow, as William looks at the letter that was written by Jane. Now, I don't want to speculate on what Jane's letter could be. Instead, I want to talk about Uru's decision to incorporate both John and Sarah's life story and William and Jane's life story in this episode. Before this episode ends and William looks at the letter that Jane wrote for him, we see the story of how these two best friends are being separated from each other, and one helping the other with their escape. Contrasted with William receiving a letter which will most likely tell us why him and Jane were separated all those years ago, without William knowing, without a reason. Like John said, he's always just assumed that he wasn't good enough for his mom. So I think it's really beautiful how Uru incorporated that. A story showing two people who are getting separated in the moment, ending, and the next episode most likely following up with the story of how two people were separated. A cripple and a god tier who managed to find each other, but because of those who make the rules of society, they've been torn apart. And this episode is really beautiful. And I can't think of any other way to say it other than that it's phenomenal. And it is a level 10. Uru, thank you so much for this episode. I honestly think this may go down as one of my favorite episodes of UnOrdinary. And I'm both scared and excited to see what you have in store for us next. So, with that being said, everyone, as always, see you, Space Cowboy.